I have no clever joke, no great opening. I have to unfortunately be serious with you because the facts are real. The topic is Israel. Because for 9 months now, every single weekend, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have flooded the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem waving Israeli flags. These are everyday Israelis, the ones who work hard, who put up with the enormously high cost of living, who serve in the military and propel Israeli success in high tech and medicine. They bring their children and their grandchildren to the protests with them to show them how Israelis really behave when threatened, not from swords of an invading army, but from the danger of destruction within. Their banners demand that the current ruling government must adhere to the principles of democracy as outlined in the Israeli Declaration of Independence, which pledges freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture, and it will safeguard the holy places of all religions, none of which is currently on the platform of the Israeli government. Instead, there is a far-right settler leaders and far-right religious fanatics, some of whom until now were considered persona non grata, even banned, actually, for their ties to terrorism, racism, and corruption. And they have captured an ultra-slim majority in the Knesset. And their aim is very clear. They wish to grab control over the various power centers in Israel, like the military and the police, the education and finance, to fulfill their own dreams. Their dreams include funding ultra-Orthodox academies that shun any secular education, thus making yeshiva students unemployable and keeping them on government-funded welfare. They wish to open up more outposts to which have been previously forbidden. They wish to roll back protections and rights for women, for LGBTQ citizens, for Israeli Arabs, and other ethnic minorities. It's not just their dream. It's happening right now. Violence against Arabs, forcing women literally to go to the back of the bus on public transport, barring them from public events. Money is now pouring into yeshivas. Speaking at a brilliant webinar last week entitled Diaspora Jews, Time to Take a Stand, sponsored by the Times of Israel, Halevi expressed his fear that has haunted him since he made Aliyah to Israel in the chaotic and destructive time of the Lebanon War 40 years ago. He said, by threatening Israel's democratic roots, what this government really is threatening is the Israeli success story. What we are seeing is the actual meeting point between political corruption and zealotry. Could this really all be coming to an end? Could 75 years of Israeli freedom be for nothing? Maddie Friedman, a brilliant journalist for the Associated Press, who made Aliyah, served in the IDF, the military, during the Lebanon War, has been warning about this in his writings for the last 3 years. In that same webinar last week, he called out the potential Lebanization of Israel. What he meant was the overtaking of the country by sectarian rule, the danger of zealotry, and the splintering of the nation into different groups, making and seeking its spoils. Lebanon is our potential future, he said. What happened there can happen to us if we're not careful, because it's happening now. The power of the state is being parceled out among extremist groups. If this continues for much longer, he warned, the country will not be able to hold on. If we want Israel to survive, he said, we need to arrest this process immediately, and we need all hands on deck. Okay, so the situation's bad. State power is literally breaking down. Theocracy and extremism is real. But why should we care? We in the diaspora tend to love Israel as an ideal. It's a Jerusalem of gold, as the good guys who pushed back Arab armies seeking to destroy Israel in the 40s through the 70s, including the Yom Kippur War. We may even have visited Israel once, stayed there for a while perhaps. But why does the diaspora figure so prominently in the cries of everyday Israelis? Why are the hundreds of thousands of Israelites who have demonstrated every weekend for 35 weeks looking to us for support? Haven't Israelis, almost since the first days of independence, told the diaspora, send your money, but let us, Israelis, determine what Israel should be? Rabbi Daniel Gordis, passionate advocate of Israel who made Aliyah back in 98, says this is a crucial moment for us in the diaspora. If you know that this is happening, and you do know, to stay silent is to put yourself firmly on the wrong side of history. To say it's gonna rock the boat if I come out on this, well, there have been lots of other places in human history where people have felt that it would be rocking the boat to come out on a very clear moral issue. And we're begging diaspora Jews to be on the right side of history. 10 days ago, on Rosh Hashanah morning, Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York City, gave this very similar sermon, the Israel sermon. Very similar in message to what I'm saying now. It's been 10 days, and as of last night, more than 37,000 people have watched this YouTube video posted of this sermon that she gave. By the way, I checked mine from Rosh Hashanah, we're hit 40. And by the way, that may have been me checking it a few times to see if the number changed, thus realizing that every time I clicked refresh, it actually counted another one, so my bad. When 37,000 people after the Rosh Hashanah service go and hear about the sermon and go click it to watch it, you take notice. And I did. So I'm going to borrow liberally from her because I'm Reform and we're liberal Jews, right? But also because what she said just needs to be heard and amplified. She said, a recent Israeli poll reported that 1 in 4 Israelis are considering leaving the country. Even if an exodus of this scale is unlikely, the numbers themselves are a cry for help. Micha Goodman an Israeli public intellectual, put this current moment in historical perspective when he related the curse of the 8th decade. Only 2 other times in Jewish history did we Jews have sovereignty over ourselves. The first Jewish state established by King David 3,000 years ago, and the Hasmonean dynasty in the Second Temple period. And in both instances, eternal strife in the 8th decade, Jew against Jew, triggered our downfall and destruction. We seized a third opportunity for ourselves for self-determination when the State of Israel was founded in 1948. But do the math. We are now in the 8th decade. You don't have to be superstitious to believe that the curse of the 8th decade could strike again. And if Israel were to no longer exist, how would you feel? I want you for a moment to imagine it. A world without a Jewish homeland. Really, see how that sits in your heart and your soul. It should feel unthinkable and compel us to act. This young, messy, miraculous Jewish state is the most important sovereign democratic project of the Jewish people of the last 2,000 years. We cannot walk away. And while the task can feel at times overwhelming, exhausting, our ethics teaches us it is not our duty to complete it, only not to abandon it. So what can we do? The first is to really listen to Israelis. Not getting the news from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, but read Israeli journalists. Put the Times of Israel, the daily podcasts, on your list. And I know this next part is hard, but try to listen in order to understand, not to offer solutions. As Maddie Freeman recently said, it sounds sentimental that Israelis need to hear that you're with us, but things feel pretty lonely over here sometimes. And that's why I'm proud that in my nearing 13 years, I'll be taking our 6th group of families of you, of Temple Kol and me, on our congregational trip to Israel this coming, we leave at the end of May. And I'm asking that even if you've been with me before, if you have not yet come, I'm going to change the itinerary a little from what's already promoted. I'm going to turn it into a little 2.0 trip. So those who've been there for the first time will still get that, but for those that have not or have been before, we're going to dig a little deeper. It's really incredibly important that now more than ever, we maintain that personal relationship with the people of Israel. So I'll add even more interactive elements of our trip this coming May and June, so it is not just a sightseeing tour. The link is in your Yom Kippur program. I urge you to come with me this May. Secondly, we, as Reformed Jews in particular, should give our support and, of course, our money. If we want to see change, we have to fortify the protesters. We have to fund the NGOs and the institutions that are building a more just, democratic, egalitarian, and pluralistic Israel. This is not about trying to make or remake Israel in America's image. This is about helping Israel live up to its own foundational inspiration as stated in the Declaration of Independence. That is an Israel worth fighting for and funding. And speaking of funding, I am proud to call attention to a new restricted fund created at Kempel Kolami, the Dorothy and Michael Blair Gift of Israel Fund. Michael was 9 years old when, in June of 1967, he remembers vividly everyone being glued to the radio, listening intently as they learned that Israel had been attacked by the combined armies of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And he remembers the joy and relief when 6 days later those armies were defeated. He remembers sitting in Yom Kippur services, October 6, 1973, 50 years ago, when he learned that the Arab world chose this day, the holiest day of our year, to launch a bold surprise attack on an unprepared Israel. It took 11 days to celebrate a victory that time, and in those days there was rarely a rabbi sermon that did not talk about Israel, or a congregation that did not have some type of program running in support of the tiny country. The American Jewish community was united in its commitment and proud to support Israel. But at some point, Michael believes the narrative changed. The news media and the college professors began casting Israel in the role of the oppressor and the colonizer. Zionism was equated with racism, and Israel was demonized as an apartheid state. Anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic rhetoric bloomed on college campuses around the country, as did attacks, both verbal and physical, on Jewish students. And seeing what was happening on college campuses, especially University of Arizona and Arizona State University campuses, Michael and Dorothy Blair wanted to do something to help Jewish students fight back. But how can students defend a country that they have no attachment to? Remembering how moved they were when they remembering how moved they were following their own trip to Israel with me back in 2013, the Blairs decided to launch a fund that would assist children of Kolami in forming the same bond that they discovered with the state of Israel. The Blair Gift of Israel Fund was established to provide every child who becomes bar bat mitzvah with a gift of $250 to help pay for the trip to Israel, preferably, but not required, with their family through Kolami. Likewise, these funds will also be available to help newlyweds who wish to participate in the Honeymoon Israel program. The Blairs believe that as Jews, we share a bond with the people and the land of Israel. Their hope is to be part of facilitating meaningful trips to Israel that will help shape positive attitudes and provide tools to counter their false and unjust narratives. So help me thank Michael and Dorothy for your gift. Thank you. Your gift gives us hope. Hope, not giving in to despair, not remaining silent, because to do so would be an act of complicity in a time of moral urgency. And if you need a shot of optimism, look no further than the protests which have stirred to action. An estimated 7 million Israelis have participated since January. From Likud to the left, from kippahs to the non-kosher, only 11% of Israelis voted for the ultra-nationalist, and ultra-religious parties that have currently hijacked this government. The vast majority of Israelis want reforms, but they also refuse to be governed by extremists, and they have not given up. The last time Israel succumbed to the 8th decade, we made our final stand atop the desert stronghold of Masada. There, first-century Jews who took their own lives thought this was the very end. And for 2,000 years, it was. But recently, Israeli scientists took ancient date seeds found in Masada's storerooms and miraculously germinated these fragments of the past into blossoming date palm trees. Long ago, the psalmist had a vision that in our promised land, the righteous would flourish like date palms. We have not realized that promise yet. Join me. Join Michael and Dorothy. Join the vast majority of Israelis and be on the right side of history. Am Yisrael Chai. Kini Hi Ratzon. May this be God's will as we say, Amen.